let's zero in now on the political reforms, Hopewell, that you've been talking about. Can you be specific in terms of which are the reforms that you think would change the nation?
To start with, we were pushed into a land reform which was not properly thought through, because we know why it happened. It's because ZANU-PF and Robert Mugabe their grip on power was being loosened, and they went for land reform. So right now, I'm one of the biggest boer goat breeders in the country, and I don't have land. So my holding capacity cannot go beyond 70 because I don't have the pastures. And there is somebody who's holding a piece of land lying idle somewhere. So if you give land on the basis of who can use it, who has the capability to use it, who has the instruments that are required to make that piece of land productive, and if you give that person tenure which they can use to go and apply for funding at a bank, that is part of the reforms that we're talking about. You reform agriculture, you make it a business. At the moment, it's not a business. A lot of people that got land through land reform are leasing it out to white farmers, the same white farmers who were kicked out by the same land reform program which was started by Robert Mugabe. So it becomes comical because you pushed people out on the basis of equal opportunity for every citizen, but that equal opportunity is not being extended to every citizen. It's partisan. You have to know somebody. Two cabinet ministers say to me, if you join the party, it will be much easier for you. You're doing a great work with your boer goats. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I could if I wanted, but I won't do that because I don't believe that I should encourage a society where you have to belong to a political party to get access to a national resource. So if you move away from land and you come to parastatals, at the moment, our parastatals are the worst performing parastatals in the region. And the reason is that they are controlled on partisan basis. You have to be a member of the party, you have to know someone in the party. And lately, unfortunately, with the current dispensation, you have to be a clansman of the president. If you look at all his appointments, they are based on clansmanship. And reforms will remove that. You don't want, Trevor, a child, a Ndebele child in Bulawayo, growing up thinking that the only best thing they can become in Zimbabwe is to become a vice president. You don't want a child from Manicaland growing up thinking that the best they can become is to become a central bank governor or a minister. We need to reform our society so that we get the best hands to do the job. But at the moment, it's not the case. And that's why I talk about political reforms which clean up these institutions. If the best engineer to run NRZ comes from Gwanda, hire that guy from Gwanda. If the best engineer to run Potras comes from Manicaland, hire that guy. If the best broadcaster comes from Mashonaland Central, hire that guy to run the broadcasting institution. So that's what I mean by reforms.
So you've spoken about
land central bank
land reform of parastatals. What other reforms? What other reforms? Maybe 2 or 3 specific ones.
If you look at the central bank, it has been used as a piggy bank. It has people that have come to power, as it were, through the Mnangagwa presidents. And those are the people now that get access to foreign currency. People like Kudata Gwire, they get access to foreign currency before everyone else, which is very unfortunate. Businesses should compete for foreign currency on the foreign currency market. But the central bank has been used as a piggy bank. You have a fixed rate, which certain groups of people get, other people don't get. You have incompetent people on different levels at the central bank who are not supposed to be there, but they are there because they are protecting the interests of people who are using it as a piggy bank. So we need to reform the central bank.
Hopefully, if I could push there, is that not just nepotism? and the appointment of friends and people that are close to those that are appointing the president or whatever, rather than the whole infrastructure rather requiring reform? Am I reading wrongly?
I think once you have reforms, if institutions are made stronger, institutions that are strong will attract the best candidates. But if you weaken an institution, for instance, the RBZ, if the appointment of the governor depends on what a president wants and not what is good for the country, then that appointment is going to be detrimental to the country. So the appointment of a central bank governor, if we have reforms, will be not at the president's whim, but it will be institutions. We know that for you to run this institution, you must have these critical skills, you must have this critical track record, and you must not have had a terrible past in the financial services industry. So once you have those as the cornerstones of how you hire people, you end up with strong institutions, you end up with strong and best people running your institutions, and you end up with a very good country. But if we don't reform that, for instance, the appointment of parastatal heads is not done through parliament as it should be. It's done through a government minister. Tomorrow we'll wake up being told that this person is now a director at this place. It's not made public. The interviews are not made public. You don't justify why someone has been hired. It's a public entity. It belongs to the people. The people must understand the processes and they must participate in that process. So one of the reasons why I turned down the ZBC offer is because I even told the minister that if I were to take such a job, because I know I'm skilled, I know I'm qualified, I want to be subjected to a public process. That process will determine whether I'm good or not. Because once I become a CEO of an entity, and people know, they've watched my interviews, they've seen my credentials, they are made of public record, then even the nation comes with me in what I'm trying to do. But if people are appointed clandestinely, the people will not support them, because in this instance, like the period in which we are living at the moment, these are the president's men and women. So you don't have the support of the country. And for a country to move forward, you need to bring everyone on board.
Okay. Let me push you back again on the issue of the appointment of clansmen. I have a problem telling whether somebody is Karanga, Manika, by looking at their name. So is that fact actually that the people that we're having appointed are the president's clansmen?
Yeah, I want to make a distinction between tribal and clansmen. The person in Bikita who is Karanga does not benefit from the misgovernance of President Emmerson Mnangagwa at all. In fact, the person who comes from the same village with President Mnangagwa might be suffering more than the person who lives in Murewa. Mm-hmm. But what's happening is these are not tribal as such. These are clansmen, your relatives, your friends, mwana wa tete, mwana wa sekuru wangu, and so forth. So these are not defined by the tribe. The tribe might be accidentally the same, but it's defined by who is closer to this person. So you'd find these clansmen might not necessarily be Karanga. They might be Zezuru, they might be Ndebele, but they are close to this person. They have a relationship. And this relationship is what has determined this appointment, as opposed to this person's skills determining the appointment.
Okay, point taken. Let's move. Now, you are now in the forefront, Hopewell, of championing the fight against corruption in government. Something must have icked you. Talk to me about what has made you so bold, so courageous. What have you seen that has made you so courageous and so bold of late?
In Zimbabwe, there's always been an argument whether the problems we face today are underpinned by sanctions or other things. I've always argued from day one that our problem is not sanctions. Zimbabwe has got enough not to even think of borrowing from the IMF or the World Bank. We've got enough resources. We are generating enough as it is. But our resources are being misused. The money is being looted. So my argument was that Zimbabwe's problems are rooted in corruption. They are rooted in incompetence, the hiring of people who are not supposed to be doing those jobs, and they are rooted in nepotism, the transmen disease. And because of that, this country has suffered badly. So I used drugs, the Minister of Health scandal, which involved drugs and Jaji and many other companies that I haven't even talked about, as an example to say, if a mask, Trevor, costs 66 cents from the factory, and you charge $34, and that money is pocketed by people who are close to the president or to the minister, how then do you use sanctions as a reason for Zimbabwe's demise when you are busy looting money from your people? Right now, if you go into hospitals, Trevor, nurses are not there. They're not available. Doctors are not coming to work because they can't work without nurses. One needs the other. But the reason why these people can't be paid and their services are so poor is because the resources that are supposed to be going into these hospitals are being looted. Our people are suffering. I got a message last night, from a pensioner who's taking home 167 Zimbabwean dollars, which is $60 in US dollars, $1.60 US. How can they survive? How then do you justify buying Land Cruisers? As we proved again, Land Cruisers are costing 110,000. The price is inflated to 450,000. And then you blame sanctions. The 60 million that is involved in the drugs deal alone would be able to run our 5 referral hospitals, Harare, Parenyatwa, Chitungwiza, Mpilo, and United Bulawayo hospitals for the whole year, and would still have 15 million to spare to use for other things. And yet today our hospitals are not working. So it really pains me, Trevor, because you and I have got a largely comfortable life because life has dealt us a better card. But other people in our society, and I don't have the sort of luxuries that we have. And if those of us who are perceived to be the elites can't stand up for the poor, then we have really let down our people. And that's why I decided to stand up. I don't need to go to Parenyatwa Hospital because I can go to a private hospital. But what does it mean when my fellow countrymen are dying daily because they can't get access to a hospital? The elderly in Gwanda, in Murewa, in Otito don't have access to painkillers. And yet the ruling elites are driving 4x4s. They're spending millions buying cars. They're spending millions buying things that are not necessary. And when they buy those things, they inflate the price and pocket the difference. How do you buy a Land Cruiser for 110,000 and then claim that you paid 400,000? It's unacceptable. And we need to push back if we are going to bequeath this country in the way it was bequeathed to us by our parents. It was in a better shape than it is now. And unfortunately, our parents did this living under very difficult times during colonial rule. And yet we've subjected our people to a lifestyle which is worse than what they were subjected to by Ian Smith. It's a terrible indictment on us.
You know my views on the sanctions. I agree with you to a large extent, but don't you concede that the sanctions do contribute to where we are right now? I mean, I cannot take anything away from what you've said, but my view is the sanctions, if they were removed, I understand why they were put in place and so forth. If sanctions were removed and we dealt with corruption and so forth, our country would be in a better place. Don't you concede that, Hopewell?
Sanctions, as President Mnangagwa said when he became president in 2017, are a creation of our bad behavior. And as President Mnangagwa said at that point in time, it is up to us to change our behavior. And that's why some of us said, okay, this guy is talking sense. Give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. And again, I'll quote President Mnangagwa. He said, what is being demanded by the United States of America is actually good for us. We don't even need America to have told us this. We should have done it on our own. So whatever contribution that sanctions bring to the bigger question of Zimbabwe can be reversed tomorrow by simply behaving well. What is wrong with doing the right thing? Because I've asked people who talk about sanctions in the way that you framed that argument. I've said, what is it which is on those demands that you object to? Do you object to people having a free media? Do you object to people having a country with strong institutions? Because those are the demands. And it was President Emmerson Mnangagwa who articulated this argument when he became president and when he was vice president. What do
you think has changed, Hopewell? The president articulates that position so very clearly that you and I agree with, that what the sanctions demand to be removed are the things that you and I want to be removed. Has the president changed, or there are vested interests that stand in the way of what the president wants to do? What's your view?
I think the president is being who he was always. I think he said the right things at the right time for him to get where he wanted to go. And when he got where he wanted to go, I don't think it's vested interest to start with that tell the president to appoint his clansmen everywhere. I've heard the argument by people who are close to the president saying he doesn't have full power. I disagree with that, because if the power lies in General Chiwenga, as some people were saying, why is it the president appoints his relatives, his clansmen, and not Chiwenga's clansmen? If it was Chiwenga who had power, we'd be seeing people from Muhweza everywhere, using that clansman template. So I don't think that the president changed. The president never changed. He just sold us a dummy, which we believed. And I must say this. I don't regret seeing the back of Robert Mugabe. I don't regret saying give this guy a chance, because the power that I wield today, my integrity today, is built upon those decisions that I made at that time. ZANU-PF cannot call me MDC, because when they did the coup, I said, let's give them a chance. I did not call them names. I did not abuse them. Even today, I don't abuse them. I abuse their acts, the things that they do that are bad. So if the president was sincere, as me and yourself and Strive Masiwa and many others thought at that point in time, we would be in a different space today. And I want to add something. This country, even with the looting that they're doing, if they were doing the right things for our country, they would still loot and would still have a better life. So there's a dangerous mixture of theft, looting, embezzlement on one hand, coupled with incompetence, cluelessness, failure to understand what needs to be done. So they are focused on crude accumulation of wealth, but they could have used that wealth to actually build a bigger cake for everyone to share. And they could still make even much more money than what they're making now. So that's why I say their rule is not only incompetent, but it's evil, because it's subjecting people to deaths. People are dying daily because of this bad behavior. People are dying because of corruption. And if the president had implemented the reforms which he used as his campaign card during the 2028 election, this country will be somewhere.
If were you to find yourself in a room with President Emmerson Mnangagwa and had an opportunity to talk to him, what would you say to him?
I'd say to him, say, you have a responsibility to cleanse the bad things that you and Robert Mugabe did together for the first part of 37 years, and that you continue to do to this very day. It will cost you nothing to do the right thing. Because my fear, Trevor, is that if things continue to get bad, we will end up with a situation where the current elites lose everything. Because if change comes through a revolution, that cannot be controlled. But if change comes through common sense, people sitting down and saying, okay, we made mistakes, let's do the right thing, then they will be able to keep whatever they looted. I actually agree with Ngosana Moyo, who said that we need to draw a line to say whatever was done on this side remains on that side. But when we cross the road to the other side and you continue doing the same thing, then we have a right to go and revisit what you did on the other side. And when change comes through violence, they will have no control of what they can get. They will have no control of keeping, whether they can keep the money that they amassed, some of it genuinely, some of it illegitimately. They will not have control. People will be killed. It will be so unnecessary. That's why in 2017, I thought that was a very important window of opportunity for this country to turn the corner and do the right thing by creating a point of departure from the violence, from the looting, the corruption, all the bad things that were taking place under Robert Mugabe. But we didn't do that. We've accentuated what was happening under Robert Mugabe to an extent that some people are now saying maybe Robert Mugabe actually pulled them back from doing some of the things that they're doing today, which is tragic. If someone says they're worse than Robert Mugabe, there's no insult worse than that to any politician.
I couldn't agree with you more. Hopewell, when I listen to you, first of all, the precedent of bringing about change through violence would be dire for this country. And yet, I see the way you were attacked when you were saying, let's give Emmerson Mnangagwa a chance. I see the way you're now being attacked for the things that you're saying and doing and talking against corruption. I am disappointed by the toxicity within our society, disappointed by the binary politics. You have to be ZANU-PF or MDC. Does that get to you?
Yes, it does. I'm equally disappointed. That's why you've seen that at times on Twitter, I jump onto your threads to diffuse the toxicity that will be taking place there, because I've had the privilege of knowing you, and I don't know if you still remember, I walked into your office whilst I was doing attachment at the Fingers, and I told you that I wanted to go to London to study. That was in 1992. So I've known you since then, and I know that you're not a bad person. You have strong views. You articulate them without having to pull back. So we have a society which has become too toxic, to a point where I can't have a conversation with a ZANU-PF guy on social media without being accused. Why are you talking to this one? And it's not a good society. We can't have a society like
that. You can't say something without having been paid by either MDC or ZANU-PF.
That's true. Right now, ZANU-PF is saying someone is paying me for exposing corruption. People who are close to the president are saying Chiwenga is paying me for exposing corruption. When I expose Kudata Gwire's shenanigans, when I articulate and accentuate what the Zimbabwe Independent wrote, somebody says, oh, he's now being paid by white people, is one now being paid by the British, because now I'm exposing what the other side is doing. But we should not have a society like that. Our society should be built on tolerance and dealing with issues.
How do we get to that, Hopewell, building a society that's built on values, on principles, on tolerance, and those kind of democratic values? Will we ever get there?
I think we can get there. What we need is good leadership. And I'm sorry, I keep using this example. Someone like George Charamba is a deputy chief cabinet secretary. He is a leader in a government. He needs to show leadership. But what he does is he comes to Twitter and he pours bile, and he pours hatred, and he pours toxicity. And that energizes the other side to do the same. And it energizes the side that's supporting him to do the same as well. So leadership, we have a tragic failure of leadership in this country. If our leaders could sit down and say, we need to do what is good for this country. And I thought that Emmerson Mnangagwa was going to do that. I mean, the guy is 79. He won't be around for a long time. The least he can do is to create a society and bequeath a society that understands each other, that understands that disagreeing is not necessarily meaning that we should be disagreeable. And supporters of political parties take cue from their leaders. So you see, when the president says something, you see it being accentuated by his supporters on social media. If the opposition leader advocate Nelson Chamisa says something, you see it being accentuated by his supporters on social media. So we have a tragic failure of leadership, and
across the board, am I right? Across the board.
I think we have a tragic failure of leadership, mainly in government, but it's across the board. Why I say mainly in government is because the guys in government have got the power to change things. The guys in opposition, they've got very little power to change things. But if a president, I can assure you, if the president called Nelson Chamisa today and said, listen, let's put the past behind us. We've done terrible things to each other and to our people. Let's put the past behind us. I can guarantee you that Nelson Chamisa or any opposition leader would listen to that, because the office that Emmerson Mnangagwa is in right now comes with a lot of responsibility. It shouldn't be power without responsibility. But if an opposition leader like Chamisa says, as he has done before, my brother Emmerson Mnangagwa, let's sit down and talk, he's ignored. So that's why I say it's mainly in government, because they have the power to drive the agenda. They have the instruments of state to drive an agenda which can bring people together.
There's been talk of late, Hopewell, that maybe because of the political bankruptcy in ZANU-PF and the cluelessness in MDC, we need a national transitional authority to run the government for some time and allow a cooling off season. Do you take a view on that?
You know, in an ideal world, Trevor, a national transitional authority is a great thing. But I have to be realistic. There's no national transitional authority that ever came by through just saying we want one. It has to be fought for. So national transitional authorities are a culmination of a battle. If people went to the streets today and did not leave those streets for 2-3 months like what they did in Sudan, you'd end up with a national transitional authority, because the powers that be would realize that things have become untenable. But at the moment, to go to Emmerson Mnangagwa and say, we want you to relinquish power, we want to have a national transitional authority run by people who are not elected, both sides will not agree. I remember when the idea was first put on the table by Tony Raila and Ibu Mandaza around 2015, 2016. Even Morgan Shanghai told me that it's not an idea worth pursuing, because it took power from the politicians, both from the opposition and the ruling party. But if tomorrow there was a battle in the streets of Zimbabwe and there was bloodshed and people are fighting each other, you'd then end up with a national transitional authority. So everyone who has raised this issue with me, I've said you have to fight for it. You have to start finding ways to figure out how you create a situation where this thing can be born.
Although I get frightened about the talk of fighting, because when fighting begins, Hopewell, you can't. It's not like a tape that you turn on and off. That's my fear.
That's why it is important for people in ZANU-PF, because that's the ruling party, to realize, Trevor, that the most important thing to do now is to bring the country together. So I've heard people talk about a government of national unity. You and I know that a government of national unity is not the panacea to our problems. Right now, the person with executive power is Emmerson Mnangagwa. What stops him from doing what a government of national authority can deliver? There's nothing that can stop Mnangagwa from doing so. There's nothing that can stop ZANU-PF from doing the reforms that can come by a government of national unity. So I see a government of national unity as a jobs for the boys. Let's stop fighting, let's eat together. That's why I'm opposed to government of national unity. I would rather we have reforms, and I would rather these reforms are done by those who have got executive power, because nothing stops them. But if they don't do these reforms, Trevor, you and I have no control of how things can pan out. We will end up with violence, because at some point, people are going to reach rock bottom. It happens in every society. I know that Zimbabweans have been called docile. Malawians were called the same thing. We used to laugh at Malawians and call them docile. But look, they've brought change to their country. They went to the streets, and the police tried to push back. They continued plowing through with their change agenda, and they now have a different political complexion in their country. So my plea is to the military in this country, to the security services in this country, and to the political elites to say, you have an opportunity to help bring change to this country. And change is not a big thing. Change doesn't mean ZANU-PF dies and MDC leaves, or MDC dies and ZANU-PF leaves. Change simply means we start doing the right things. And these right things will benefit children of ZANU-PF politicians, children of MDC politicians, all of us. When we have water in our homes, running water, it's change. Everybody loves to have running water in their homes. I have running water in my home, but the people where I grew up in Glenora don't have access to that. So when you bring change, it means these people will have running water, and this change can be brought by politicians showing maturity and being leaders and leading well.
Do you feel safe? We've had Patrick Chinamasa calling a press conference and saying unkind words about you. We've had the ZANU-PF youths doing the same thing. Do you feel safe?
You know, Trevor, I've reached a point where I say to myself, whether I'm scared, terrified, or living in fear, it makes no difference. Because if someone wants to get to me, whether I'm bold or whether I'm scared, they'll still get to me. So I've decided to say, I'll just soldier on. Nobody's safe at the moment if you criticize the government, because you get attacked. So Patrick Chinamasa attacked me, called me unscrupulous. ZANU-PF Youth League at a press conference yesterday, they called me names. What that does, it energizes the toxicity we were talking about. It's an open check to supporters of ZANU-PF to say, if our leaders have said this about this guy, so we should go for him, we should attack him. It's an open check for rogue elements in the state to say, if we harm this guy, nothing will happen, because we've been given a signal by our people. And that's not a good society to live in. That's not what we thought 2017 November coup was about. We thought it was about putting an end to instilling fear in citizens and leading through consensus, governing through consensus, and winning hearts and minds of people. But unfortunately, we're back again. I mean, under Robert Mugabe, I never had a press conference against me. I have reported worse things under Robert Mugabe, but it never happened to me in that way. But today, you have people being incarcerated, people being abducted, people being beaten up, sexually abused, people being killed. And this is supposed to be a new dispensation, supposed to be a second republic. There's nothing new about it. It's the same old stuff. You know, there was a deception at the beginning, and they've come out in the open that nothing has changed, and they've continued. But it's bad, because it's not only about their own legacy, but it's about what will happen to their children. Because we've seen it in every African country. These guys, I can tell you, Trevor, mark today, they will lose everything when they die or when they lose power. Because that is the nature of the vindictiveness that they are creating today. People will be angry and will remain angry until someone in ZANU-PF says, wait a minute, let's step down from this terrible space where we are operating on, where we are running the country through toxicity, vile comments, and so forth. Let's bring the country together Let's make our children understand that this country belongs to all of them, not just to one group. Because what will happen is, if another group prevails over ZANU-PF, then we will continue with the same toxicity, because this group will feel that it has vanquished this other side, and this other side must never, ever get another opportunity to do what it is doing to us today, and it's not a good thing. So that's why I keep saying that I appeal to the people with power in this country, and it's the military, state security, the president, the ruling elites in ZANU-PF, to understand that whatever they're building today, they might lose everything tomorrow. It happened to Sana Abache. It has happened to many other people like Mobutu Sese Seko. There are things were dragged and they were brought back. So they have to choose, is that what they want? The president is 79. You won't be around in 30 years' time. Does he want that sort of legacy for his children to lose everything that he's worked for? I hope not. And I hope this will trigger some kind of reflection on our leaders to understand that they still have a bit of chance to do the right thing and bring the country together, so that we can all live well and we can all live successful lives.
I would have thought, Hopewell, that the way Robert Mugabe left would have made a lot of people reflect and do exactly what you're talking about. That power, you have it today, it's gone tomorrow. And you try and do the best you can to be impactful whilst you have that power for the good of everybody, not just yourself and your clansmen.
I totally agree, Trevor. And that's the premise for common sense. That's why from the onset, Morgan Tsvangirai and Nelson Chamisa were prepared to give Emmerson Mnangagwa a chance. And that's why the MDC said that this guy, okay, he's the legitimate leader at this point in time after the coup. Because they also thought, those of us who had discussions with these opposition leaders, also thought that the president was going to be magnanimous and say, let's build the country together, as he was saying initially. But it turned out to be different. It became, I think one striking thing was Patrick Chinamasa saying that this is the ZANU-PF affair. That to me was just downhill. The big spoiler.
It was downhill from there on.
Yes, it was downhill. And it was so unnecessary, because that at that moment, there was something magnetic that happened, Trevor, that saw white people, black people hugging together in the streets, in the streets. That saw MDC and ZANU-PF people hugging in the streets. That saw opposition and people like Chris Mchangwa sharing the stage at Gwanzura Stadium. That was a huge opportunity to turn the fortunes of this country around. But it was lost because of greediness. It was greedy that lost us that very, very key and opportune moment, because people wanted a winner take all. They thought that it was their time to do as what Robert Mugabe used to do. And unfortunately, we are where we are today now, and the country is in a worse situation and state than what it was when Robert Mugabe left. And this didn't have to be this way.
I think at that hopeful, sort of hopeful moment, Hopewell, you and I love goats. Shall we tend to boar goats now? Something which will make us smile. How is your boar goat farming going? How many do you have now? And what's the project looking like?
The project is going on well. We just had six new goats born last night.
Beautiful.
But the unfortunate thing is that the citizens don't have money. We used to have a backlog for 12 to 18 months. And when I speak to my fellow breeders, it's hard to sell the goats, because a young boer goat, which is 6 months old, a buck, we call them bucks when it's a male, it sells for about $500 US. They were flying off the shelf, when things were okay. But things are now bad. The economy is bad. People don't have that kind of money. And so you find that a lot of people in the farming industry are suffering because of that. And that is why I was saying that it's important for us to implement political reforms that will not only reform how Trevor and Hopewell relate with each other, but that will reform the institutions that give us bread in the morning. The institutions like farming, cattle, goats, chickens, and things like that. Why is it one of the biggest breeders of Boer goats can't get access to land simply because he criticizes the sitting government? It's ridiculous. And so because of that, there's been a lot of problems because those with the land, they can't do the breeding. Those with no land are doing the breeding. But I must say that it's something that I hope when things change, we need to push these goats into rural areas, because a Boer goat, a male Boer goat at 18 months, it weighs 120 kgs. Our indigenous goats at 18 months, they weigh 20 kgs. The one that is born out of crossbreeding the two, it will be weighing about 60 to 70 kgs. So we can transform the quality of our goats in rural areas. And since goats are sold by the kilo, it means our people will make a lot of money by just keeping these goats. And it will resolve a lot of issues. I mean, Zimbabwe's problems, they don't require a rocket scientist to fix, Trevor. We know what needs to be done. We've got the brains to do it. It's just the political will that is lacking. Otherwise, this country will be selling goats to Saudi Arabia. I get inquiries from places like Saudi Arabia. I've sold goats to Malawi. I've sold goats to going to Mozambique. And if we could focus on doing the right thing, I think our economy would not need even 12 months to turn around, because we've got the critical skills. We've got the right skill set to turn around our economy. We just need the political will to do the right thing.
Hopewell, again, very, very hopeful and inspiring words. You've got lots of books behind you. The people that watch this show, as you know, love books. The Trevor Book Club is very popular with in conversation viewers. What 3 books have you read, Hopewell, that have impacted your life positively?
I think professionally, one of the books that really opened my mind was A Hidden Agenda by John Pilger. It's a book that I don't get bored reading time and time again. It exposed me to understanding that in the world, there's not necessarily good and bad. The good guys can be bad as well. The bad guys can be good as well. So it really had a huge impact on my life. Recently, I'm reading A Political Animal by the broadcaster Jeremy Paxman. It's about political culture, British political culture. And reading that book, sometimes you feel like you're back in Zimbabwe, because sometimes politicians, they've got some sort of hideous tactics in trying to get votes. It's a very illuminating book, especially I would recommend it for journalists to read it. It talks about the things that we need to keep an eye on as journalists. And third book, I read a very interesting book. I know your viewers will laugh at me. It's called Affairs.
Right.
It talks about adulterous relationships. It explains the whole culture of adultery, how it started, and how in certain societies men tend to get away with things. So in France, a man can have a mistress, and they're actually respected for that. And in certain societies, if a man has a mistress, they can lose their job. In certain societies, if a man has got 3 wives, they are seen as a big man. So those are the 3 books that I've been reading lately.
The book Affairs?
I'm forgetting the author.
Don't worry,
but I'll get the author for you.
That would be good. Fantastic. Hopewell,
All
this
right.
has been an amazing conversation. A conversation that a lot of people in society on social media have been asking that you and I should have. obviously made much more important by your being very outspoken when it comes to corruption of late. I hope that you stay safe, that those that have been irritated by your exposure of corruption keep away from you, because tolerance is what makes a democracy work. And freedom of expression and press freedom are fundamentally important to any democracy. So for me, it's very important. I might disagree with you, but I will defend your right to speak at all times. I think that's what we need to build a new society. So Hopewell, thank you so much for creating the time to be on in conversation. Stay safe. Don't lose your voice. Don't lose your courage. Zimbabwe needs courageous people to transform into a new society. So thank you so much. Allow me to turn to our viewers all over the continent, in Zimbabwe, in the diaspora. We are a weekly show. We appreciate your support every week. So that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, please press this red button here and subscribe, and you'll get an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations. So until next week, cheers.